All right, good morning, and you are in the renewable energy on Brownfields session. Hopefully you mean to be here. If not, you might want to take a look at your agenda and find another room, but we're glad you're here and we hope you stay. So I'm Casey Corbini. I'm with the West Virginia DEP, and I get the pleasure of moderating this panel today. I know like this much and they know that much. So you're in for a real treat. It's basically renewable energy 101 plus some. So I think you're gonna really enjoy it. We're gonna be talking about the key steps involved in converting brownfields into renewable energy sites. We're gonna be talking about additional considerations and challenges with these sorts of projects. We have the Hardy County planner here today who's going to provide a whole unique perspective about these sorts of projects. And then finally, for our finale, Beth Whitehouse is here from Ogilvy, and she's going to talk about a project that they're working on. And while it's not a brownfield, it's still a really cool project, and we're here, so let's hear about it. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our first speaker today is Dave Palmerton with CSC Engineers.
SCS.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
SCS. It's been a long couple days for me. All right, so I'll go ahead and pass it off to you.
Oh,
there you go.
thank you.
Do you want to sit there or stand? It's up to you.
I'll stand. And we just push this button here. This one here.
I think it's advanced. The right
Oh,
one.
okay. Thank you. Thanks. SCS. It's not CSC. We're well known. I'm just going to talk to you today. Well, first of all, thanks for coming. It's being, with it being one of the last sessions of the week, it's nice that you're here. Hope we'll do well by you. And I'm going to just talk about two things. It's going to be real simple. It's going to be short, so it won't take long. We're going to talk about landfills being used for solar energy or other energy sources, and mines. So I want you to think about those two types of facilities and how they could be used for solar energy, basically. We will talk a little bit about renewable natural gas on landfills, but that's something a little bit different. When I started thinking about this,
Are you trying to advance?
yeah, I'm trying to advance it, but
Let me see if it's turned on.
I just hit this. I just do this.
Yeah, my
So when I started thinking about brownfields, I was thinking, where did that word come from? Does anybody know where brownfields started? Ah, that's good. So, so it's not gonna change at all.
when we need them.
Okay, all right. So it started in 1995 with the Brownfields Action Agenda. That was an EPA thing. And what I did is I used Google, and there's a thing called Ngram Viewer, and you could kind of look to see where the term first came into use. And as you can see there, around 1995, 1996, it's where it first started. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, like I said, we're going to talk about landfills and abandoned mines as solar opportunities. And we'll start with landfills. There's at least 30 landfills in West Virginia. Converting these to solar is a sustainable development goal. As I said in the beginning, some of these landfills have renewable natural gas, where they're taking the methane from the decomposition of the waste. But we're going to talk today about the solar energy installations, and my compatriots here on the stage will get into some more details in terms of the actual requirements and costs involved in creating the solar energy. So solar can be any one of three different types. You can have the utility solar projects. That's where the energy is going into the system and gets distributed widely amongst different users. You can have community scale projects where the electricity is actually being used by the community. And I know one of the folks up here will talk about that a little bit more. And then we have direct use applications where a solar project can actually feed technology or different types of work on a particular site. So this is a site in West Virginia, Maryland. It's called Kempton Mine. So one of the things that's interesting is that much like landfills, mines have large areas available for solar. This does not have a solar project on it. I just use it as an example. But renewable projects are a growing trend with landfills, and I'll get into one of the examples later. And one of the reasons is the existing infrastructure that's there is helpful. And like landfills, abandoned mines often have the existing infrastructure, cleared land, some of the road access, different things of that sort. Solar projects provide an opportunity to repurpose the land, generate clean electricity or clean energy, and potentially create jobs where there was once mining jobs. Maybe some jobs could be created for solar. Here's a map of the abandoned surface mines in West Virginia. As you can see, there's hundreds of surface mines, and as we think about using those, out of the hundreds of mines that are out there, there's got to be some that are available for solar. The Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, we all know about that. That's the money that's coming into industry for renewable energy and for closing oil wells, and also for going back to cleaning up abandoned mines. So West Virginia received $140 million in federal funding, so there is money available to be put into the system. And as I said before, the electricity generated on a mine site can be used to power treatment systems, for example. So you could actually treat your acid mine drainage. West Virginia University has a nice document for potential solar on abandoned mines. They talk about over 400,000 acres of former mine lands available. The former Starflower mine in Kentucky. This is that's on my next slide. Sorry. So sometimes the regulations force mine operators to remove trees from slopes and refuse disposal areas due to the potential for compromising the integrity of the slope. So that's why there's some pushback on installing solar or wind on some of these facilities. Somehow we got Well, so. Okay, so SCS, about half of our company is involved on landfills or solid waste projects. So we work on literally hundreds of landfills across the US. And so when solar became popular for installation on these landfills, obviously we were there and ready to take advantage of it. So I'm just throwing up a couple of examples to show that there's sites in Wisconsin and Florida and Maryland and different places. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Oaks landfill here in just a minute. So some of the key steps to installing the landfill in a solar energy project is site assessment. This includes evaluating different factors such as the size of the site, the topography, soil conditions, access to sunlight, those sorts of things. You also have to do landfill cap modification. The cap, and I'll talk about this again later, but the cap in landfills is really, really important. So there can't be any disturbance of the cap. Creates a lot of potential problems that we'll go into a little bit. But in many cases, the landfill cap, basically the final cover needs to be modified to accommodate the installation of solar panels. This may involve adding ballast mounting systems to secure the solar panels to ensure their stability. And of course, landfill gas management before installing the solar panels. Gas management system is typically implemented to capture, properly handle the methane gas as that comes out. Let's see, we got landfill gas management, environmental considerations. The landfills have the hazardous substances or contaminants that need to be addressed. So you have to have some different environmental considerations to consider there. And the actual solar array installation, once the site is prepared, solar panels have to be installed on the modified landfill cap. And then we have grid connection, and our folks here are going to talk a little bit more about that later, but sorry, I'm trying to scroll through here. Anyways, the generated energy is put into the grid, and then of course there's ongoing operation and maintenance activities. So there's design considerations, initially developing an economic pro forma for the landfill. In other words, what's it going to cost over time? Typically, I think they look at what, 20, 30 years. There's the design for installation of the solar panels, assessing the annual output, and you have to evaluate the wind loading, foundation design criteria, and stormwater is a very big issue. There's a lot of regulations around stormwater and how that is to be handled. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Oaks landfill. So this will give you an example of a site that SCS did. There's 2 arrays or 3 arrays on the site. One goes to the county. So the power from that is generated, goes to the county. The other arrays are community solar. So those actually go to low to moderate income subscribers. So this is 500 acres or so. The capped portion of the landfill is 170 acres, and the company that we work with was Ameresco. The photovoltaic arrays on the proposed landfill is kind of a new endeavor. Permitting required, there's much permitting required at the state and the municipal levels. Like I said before, stormwater management is a major consideration, and we already talked about working with Amoresco. So this just gives you an idea of some of the steps that you have to go through. Here we're dealing with the Maryland Department of Environmental Permitting. And then there's the county permitting, and there's a number of submissions that have to go with the county. Of course, stormwater, sediment erosion control, building permits, and other regulatory processes that have to take place. And working out well. So one of the steps is in Maryland, you have to put together a solid waste program report. This involves all these steps you see here. As you can see, landfill cap damage control, the array outline, the soil erosion, all those sorts of things, just demonstrates that there's a whole lot of steps going into this process. It's not just throw up some solar panels and go to work. There's many steps along the way and many reports that have to take place. I'm really sorry about the way this is not working. So here's the end result at the Oaks landfill. This is putting out 11.4 kilowatt hours, 930 homes, and it's equivalent to taking 1,740 cars off the road. You know, it's expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll move on to the next slide. Good Lord. I don't understand why it's there it goes. So as I said, on a landfill, you really have to protect the cap at all costs. The cap's the most important vulnerable component to a landfill, and about 2 to 3 feet of cover soil is used in a cap, and it may not include a geomembrane cap. So no digging. Solar arrays constructed on landfills typically utilize concrete ballast because they don't want to penetrate the cap. If they do have installation where they're going to penetrate the cap, there's a whole series of information that a whole series of tasks that have to be done to make sure that the cap is secure, that they've put in a geomembrane and make sure that there's gas isn't released. Typically, the weight-bearing capacity is 7 psi. That's equivalent to about 70 pounds on 10 square inches. And low ground pressure equipment has to be used when you're working up on a landfill. To eliminate the need for trenching, on-grade cable trays are used to route the cabling conduit and to avoid underground utilities. Air knifing is typically used. So, especially with community solar, you know, basically everyone benefits. You generate significant economic impacts, and It improves customer relationships for the power company that's doing the work. So I said it would be short. It's solar development opportunities can be constructed on landfills and surface mines. We have sustainable development goals. These lead to green energy and potentially jobs, and it increases the environmental, economic, social benefits of cleanup efforts. And that's all I have. I hope it goes better with the others.
All right, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. We're going to save questions for the end unless you have anything super burning right now that you need to ask, David. So next we're going to hand it over to Jen Hall. She's the Vice President of Project Management and the Corporate Secretary for IMC Solar, which is based in St. Clairsville, right? Okay, local, very local, Cross River. And Kurt Prinsick, who is the Senior Project Development Manager at CEP Renewables, and they work together quite frequently, and they're here today to talk to you about some challenges that they've encountered and some additional considerations that you should think about based on their experience.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Just a little background on me. Again, my name's Kurt Prinsick. Prior to working at CEP Renewables, and I've been in the solar space for about 8 months now, so I'm very new to this industry. Prior to that, I worked for Ohio EPA for 31 years, the last 12 of which I was district chief at the Northeast District Office. And my background, foundation at the agency was in the solid waste program. So I've done a lot of work on landfills from a regulatory standpoint, and now I'm excited to be involved in the solar development side of it. So what I want to go over today is calling it turning trash into treasure, and I have a presentation where I'm going to discuss CEP's signature project right now, and it's the Mount Olive site in Mount Olive, New Jersey.
I'll be there forever.
We can definitely get a hold of you.
Where's the IT guy?
He's on his way. He was like, it's so easy, you just do this, and I did that, and it didn't work. It the online virtual participants can see the correct presentation.
Oh.
It's just not up here for some reason. All right, so if you have questions for David, let's entertain them right now.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Here, I'll just make one comment. Leave my Brownfield hat on just for a minute. And the comment is, I always tell everybody in the Brownfield arena, if you don't have the property owner on board, you don't have a project. And now take that hat off and put another hat on over at Marshall with some other stuff we've done over the years. We completed some actual solar evaluation studies on a few mining properties and some other sites, on whole landfill and some other property, abandoned property. And I use one example as a story. I went to one group of people. Collectively, there was about a dozen private people that owned the surface mine land, huge property, and great potential. Talking what we were going to do and everything, real simple. And I won't tell you why we got into doing this, but the whole issue was our report. Here's the property. Here's who owns it. Here's a 10% slope analysis we did on a few things like that. Here's where the closest substation is. Here's the guy you need to talk to if you're interested in this property. Well, I approached this one group of people and I said, look, there was a study done back a few years ago and I showed it to them. And I won't use his language, but he is the manager of that, all that property, was very upset because a consultant had used their property as an example for solar farm development and had never even contacted him. And he immediately called them and said, you will never be on our property. And that company said, well, we've never been there. And he said, well, why are you writing about us? So my point is make sure you got the property owners on board. Some of our big landholding companies are very interested in other ways they can use their property to make money. That was not the case not very many years ago. I have been told many times, years past, no, we're not interested in solar, that's direct competition with our natural gas, with our coal, whatever, we're not interested. That is changing huge, but
Yeah,
keep property owners on board, get them on board. And by the way, the end of the story is this gentleman called me back several months ago and said he owed our Department of State dinner because they now have two solar companies that are trying to get in the front seat
Yeah.
with them. And the numbers they're throwing out for them to lease their property, et cetera, they said they are amazed.
yeah,
So if you can get that early on, I mean.
Well, that's-
some great things.
That is the first thing we do, is we have to, I mean, there's a few things you have to have a solar project. First one is the property owner on board. And then the second one is access to three-phase utility and access to a substation. If you don't have any of those three, you could have the best property in the world, you don't have a project.
That was the other thing with actually what infrastructure was available.
Yeah.
They were very simple reports.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, those are three boxes you could, you can check, right? I mean, you can do that from a desktop, you can do that from Google Earth, Google Maps.
Well, what happened in this case was they did just that, but they never called the official
Wow.
manager of the property.
Shame on them.
And it was nasty for a little while, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Oh, I believe it. Just some other, yeah, go
I
ahead.
got a question, Dave. On your ballasting systems on the landfills.
Yeah.
Where the concrete bases are you seeing any type of localized depressions forming that's altering the flow of stormwater runoff from the panels? Such as is it preferentially collecting?
Yes.
underneath?
yeah, that can happen. Yeah, I mean, not universally, but yeah. And that has to be managed. Yeah,
Has there been any work done to that, degrade the, if you're using concrete ballast, does that degrade them quicker, or have you, is there not really enough, experience to make that?
I don't know about that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
You can, to address that, they often set it on maybe a gravel foundation, maybe 6 inches of gravel. They do that to level the ballasts and to also provide some drainage. But the sites I've been at, I really haven't seen that problem.
Okay, excellent.
back to the other point that was being made, another thing that we're seeing is actual, surprisingly, communities sometimes not wanting solar. So it's kind of going the other way.
Well, and that, yeah,
Right.
we will address
Yeah.
that. All right, I think we're ready to go. We're back in business.
Let me just hide all this nasty stuff real quick.
Next slide.
Where were you before?
Hold on. There we go. All right. Okay, all right, so just a little bit about CEP Renewables. We are a solar development firm. We've done work globally, in Asia, Europe, and North America. We specialize and our focus is on distressed sites. We target landfills and brownfields primarily. We will do work on greenfields as well, but we really do try and focus on the landfills and brownfields, and have found a niche there, and it's just a great opportunity. And generally, you do get community buy-in. We have some incentives for the communities that I'll get into that really make these attractive. Okay, so we have currently $250 million worth of projects. We have about 1 gigawatt in development. And on the right side there, you see the sites that we've worked on. These are all landfills and brownfields in New Jersey. A lot of our work has been done in New Jersey. The state is about at least a decade ahead of Ohio. I can't speak for West Virginia in terms of community solar programs and incentives. So this is really where we've done a lot of work, is in the New Jersey area. And what I want to focus on and building on some of what Dave had is this idea of turning trash into treasure. And let's turn these solid waste landfills, hazardous waste landfills, surface, closed surface water lagoons. Let's turn those into valuable instead of a liability for a company or a community, we can turn it into a revenue generating asset. There's estimated to be about 10,000 closed landfills in the United States. Combined, they could host almost 60 gigawatts of capacity. And if you think of a gigawatt having enough energy to provide energy for 750,000 homes, that could put a really sizable chunk into the nation's renewable energy portfolio. And also, 1 gigawatt plant would be a very good sized coal plant or natural gas plant. So we've seen an 80% increase in development in the last 5 years on landfills. And I can tell you there will be more to come because people are definitely targeting landfills. I can speak for Ohio. That's where we are targeting, and we'll see some development on these sites relatively soon. So the site I wanted to focus on, it's called the Comeville North Landfill. This was a municipal solid waste landfill in Mount Olive, New Jersey. It was a 65-acre landfill on a 102-acre property, accepted what you would expect out of a solid waste landfill. It took surface water sludges, it took municipal solid waste, certainly some household hazardous wastes, other industrial waste. It operated from 66 to 1978, and resulted in contamination to groundwater in the community. The owner went bankrupt in 1981 and had never completed closure. And this was one of the first sites placed on the NPL in New Jersey, and that happened in 1982. NPL being the National Priority List. So EPA and New Jersey DEP selected a cleanup remedy in 1986, and then the remedial action was completed in 1991. And typical with solid waste landfills, they put in an engineered cap, they address stormwater, groundwater monitoring, methane gas, and then they did have to install water lines in the community because of the groundwater contamination. So moving on, the site really sat dormant for 40 plus years. US EPA completed their 5th 5-year review in 2019. The site was removed from the NPL in 2004. The site, again, there isn't a lot you can do on these old landfills. So there was no tax revenue. In fact, the previous owner had defaulted on his taxes to the tune of $2.3 million. So there really were no development opportunities for this facility. So the project began. CEP and the township entered into a public-private partnership. There was a tax for sale closure and a redevelopment deal. And through that process, CEP actually required title of the property. There aren't many developers that are gonna buy a Superfund site, but we did with an agreement with US EPA and New Jersey DEP. And there was an administrative consent order that formalized all this. And at the end of the day, New Jersey DEP maintained liability for the groundwater and the methane gas. And then CEP maintains the cap system. So here's your before and after. We maximized to the extent we could. We had the site closed like it did. This was kind of your grandpa's landfill, not a BAT landfill of today's vintage. So shallow slopes. You could develop the entire landfill, and all 65 acres were developed. There were some construction challenges that came with this. Dave mentioned some of them. The key here for DEP was that, ensuring that the landfill cap was not compromised. So we had to do the settlement analysis, getting to your concerns about the, are the ballasted systems gonna cause differential settlement? The racking system couldn't impact the cap system. We needed to maintain access to the gas system, so the state could get out there, and you'll see in that picture, we left buffers around, there's a passive gas system. We left buffers around there so they could get in there and monitor and do what they needed to do. One of the benefits of this ballasted system, and I have some better pictures of it, is, in the event something, you had a serious malfunction with that gas well, you can remove those. You can remove the solar panels, you can remove the ballast, take a certain period or area offline, and then you could bring in your equipment if for some reason you had to abandon that well and grout it, or you had to put in a new one. So that is one advantage of these ballasted systems. So again, we needed to make sure that we maintain the engineering controls for gas collection and stormwater management. So here's a picture. This is not the Mount Olive site. This is a site in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County. This was the first landfill project or solar to landfill project in the state of Ohio. But you can see the concrete ballasts there, and how the pipe chase here is all on ballast. Everything is above ground, including the fencing. Even the fencing around this, for electrical code, we have to maintain an 8-foot fence. Even that was on concrete ballast and not put into the cap. And you can see there, I've walked this site a few times and I haven't seen concerns about settlement and ponding of water here. This is a picture of construction actually at Mount Olive. It gives you a better detail of the racking system and the ballast system. As you see, like Dave mentioned, the tracked vehicles, low ground pressure vehicles, whatever, it's a construction project. You can see we destroyed the cap system there. There isn't any vegetative cover. I mean, you're gonna have to break some eggs to make an omelet, but you want to minimize it, and you have to be diligent to repair it as soon as you're done. And then you can see we actually got on the left side there, got vegetation already established underneath the solar panels. So you just do the best you can and work as quickly as you can to minimize any impacts to the cap. Again, gives you a little idea of the pipe chasing, how that is on ballast. And again, just another photo with vegetation completely established. And surprisingly, you don't have any problems getting vegetation underneath the solar arrays. You think, oh, all the shading and that would be a problem. It isn't. It really grows quite well. Again, just more pictures of the ballast system. You can see on the right hand side there, that's the inverters. And we had to maintain the stormwater system, like Dave mentioned. That was another priority for the community, for DEP. Another picture, you can get another feel here for the providing access in the middle of the screen to the gas, the methane gas vent. And you see again just the lightweight vehicles working on the landfill. Another photo. So we completed the project. We are proud to say that this is right now the largest landfill to solar project in the United States at 25.6 megawatts, and took what was formerly a US EPA Superfund site into a community asset now that is providing electricity to the grid and providing a revenue source to Mount Olive. Another project that and I'll just highlight a couple other projects. This is the BEMS project. This is the largest community solar project in New Jersey. Community solar projects can only be max out at 5 megawatts. This one happens to be 10, and you're trying to figure out the math there, right? Reason being, this site was bisected by two different utilities. So we sent 5 megawatts to one utility and 5 to the other. So, that's just luck, right? I mean, you can't make that happen. That just happened for this site. But, we took it and very proud that we have the largest community solar project in New Jersey. This was another US EPA Superfund site. It's owned by Republic. Prior to that, it was BFI, Browning Ferris. This is another landfill project. And you can see this site closed in the 80s. It's not 3-to-1 slopes. It's not, those 3-to-1 slopes are not constructible. You need shallow. We can get up to about 15 degrees is where we would about max out. But again, 13 megawatts for community solar in New Jersey. Mill Road, this is a brownfield site. This was a pulp and paper making facility, and they had just sprayed pulp and paper making waste. Wherever you see solar, that's where they spray irrigated their sludges. Ended up with a brownfield site. So we were able to generate, it was 2 different projects. They were each in the neighborhood of 9 megawatts. So we maxed out at 18 megawatts here. So we did receive the Power Magazine Top Renewable Energy Plant of the Year Award for the Mount Olive project. And then the Mount Olive Township also got an Innovation and Governance Award for the project as well as in 2021. So really proud of those, of the awards. And, I think it shows what you can do if you have a landfill. Don't write it off. Your community, it can be an asset. If you have the right things in place with electrical infrastructure and some luck there, you can turn it into an asset. And right now, lots of states are looking at community solar as the vehicle to get this done. Ohio proposed legislation was dropped on June 6th. And we'll be testifying here at the end of September on the proposed legislation, and really hoping that gets passed, because that will open up, at least in Ohio, lots of opportunities. So the one other real, before I forget, is because I keep talking about, how these sites generate revenue for the communities, and I can speak to Ohio. I'm working on a project right now. It's a 128-acre property, closed landfill. It generates about $900 a year in property taxes for this, a very low income community. So if we can get 10 megawatts of solar there, Ohio requires, through our pilot program, payment in lieu of tax, that we have to pay $7,000 per megawatt per year to the taxing authority, and then $2,000 per megawatt to the county. So we will essentially take this property that was generating $900 per year, and now we're generating $90,000 per year. And I can tell you, for this community, that is going to be hugely meaningful. And the beauty of this is it doesn't count, if you do your regular tax method, it counts against school funding. This doesn't. So there's it's hyperbole, right? You say win-win, but these projects truly are win-win. You get a win for the community because they get increased tax revenue. The developer can make some money. And then where the state comes in and the regulators is they get another 30 years of post-closure care for their facilities. A lot of these sites are coming out of post-closure care. The 30 years is gone. So you get stewardship on these properties for another 30 years plus. So it really can be a great advantage to everyone to make these things happen. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. I have to say, my most amazing part of your presentation was the fact that the Superfund site cleanup was done in 5 years. I kept rereading it multiple times. All right, I'm now going to invite Melissa Scott to speak. She's the Hardy County planner and has a unique perspective from a planner's point of view that she's going to share with us today.
Thank you. So I'm a land use planner, and some of these guys may have thought I was gonna be, opposed to what they're doing, but I'm very, very happy to see these successful projects happening on Brownfields. I'm from Hardy County, from the Potomac Highlands, the elbow out in the eastern panhandle, and we're a huge ag region, and Hardy County is the top ag county in West Virginia, and one of the top ag counties in the nation, actually. So we're very keen on keeping our farmland, and so I'm just going to give you our perspective. Let's see. So first of all, I think a lot of people don't understand the different types of solar, so I was going to give you a little bit of background. Dave kind of touched on that a little bit, but there's different types of solar and different people that benefit from those types of solar. Then I'm going to talk about how much land is needed for our renewable energy goals, where the degraded land is in West Virginia, and Dave had that map as well. It's really interesting. And is West Virginia considering sustainability and when they're locating these projects, and how can we promote smart development of renewable energy on degraded sites instead of our ag land? So the three main types of solar projects are distributed or behind the meter. And those are, they have an identified end user. They're usually residential or commercial, on rooftops or ground arrays. Community solar, which is, they've talked about that a little bit. Those are usually ground arrays, single source, one location, less than 5 megawatts, and the users subscribe to those types of solar projects. So they're usually the locals around the project. And I think we'll talk about how far away those can be later on. And then there's utility scale projects, and those are the large projects that you see. I don't know if you've driven around and seen any of those. There's some really large ones in Virginia. And that's what's called kind of merchant power. It's fed to the grid, or it can be fed to a utility or a large user. So I just wanted to show you what these things look like. The distributed or behind the meter, that's what you see. We have a lot of these going in Hardy County, rooftops and on businesses. Just to give you some perspective, when we talk about megawatts, kilowatts, one home uses 25 to 30 kilowatts per day of power. So just another example, on businesses, these projects have really low impact as far as the land use planner goes. We want to promote these. We want to make these, a by right use in most cases. This is a large, it's a little bit different, but it's basically a behind the meter project. It's supposedly the largest one in West Virginia right now. It's in Hardy County. It's on a poultry farm, and it provides all the power for 21 house facility. So, and that's just started up fairly recently. So again, the distributed or behind the meter, the landowner owns that project. So it's on the rooftop usually, or next to their property. The landowner uses the energy, and the landowner gets to sell the excess energy or credits back to the power provider. So, and that's called net metering that you've heard of. So here's what community or projects can look like, or shared solar. And I'm really happy to see that you've done some, community projects on the degraded land. That's amazing. So, these are projects less than 5 megawatts that are like shared, like I said. So the one on the right over there kind of looks like maybe that's providing power to that neighborhood. Those are probably likely the subscribers to that facility. And there's a little bit larger rooftop that I believe is community solar project. I thought this was really neat because it's the solar panels are above a parking lot. I just think that was a really creative and interesting way to do things. So again, community solar is landowner or third party owned, and the subscribers are the neighbors of that project, and the owner receives credit for their excess energy. Then we have the large to mid-sized public utilities solar. There's utility solar is kind of a subcategory of that, is that it's producing energy for a utility. And that's a little bit different than the really large projects where the energy goes straight to the grid. Because in the utility projects where the power goes to the utility, it's still definitely benefiting, you know, the local community because they're using the power. These are utility scale projects. I mean, these are really land intensive. So as a land use planner, this gives me a little bit of heartburn when I think about, you know, for instance, the one on the right is actually an 850 acre project. It's producing 100 megawatts of energy for one business, and that's the Meta data center in Georgia. So when we look at that and we think about how much land that's using for one business, is that truly sustainable? I'm just going to touch on utility scale wind because that's an issue in Hardy County and Grant County in my area in the Potomac Islands. But this is what those look like. I actually took the one here on the left. So these projects often start out on degraded land, like in Grant County, it did that. But you know, the larger a project is, the more financially feasible it is for the developers. So sometimes those projects can kind of spread along the mountaintops and take out forests and things like that. So we just need to be cognizant of that and not let that spread and take too much land on the mountaintops. And it does, you know, some people love to look at them. I mean, they think they're beautiful. Others think it has a negative impact on our you know, recreation economy and tourism, but I don't know if there's really any true answer to that yet. So again, utility scale, that's where the landowner gets the lease payments, and they touched on that a little bit. They can be significant. The leases are usually 30 to 50 years. The developer or the project owner then sells the energy to the highest bidder. That's a utility, corporate off-taker like the Meta, or directly to a wholesale market. The problem with the wholesale market, like huge projects, is that you know, they often, the energy is shipped to places far away from where the project is located. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is a graphic from the Solar Energy Industry Administration, and it shows the increase in solar since 2014. You can see that utility scale solar is what is really expanding. So the residential and the non-residential, which I guess that would be the commercial, it's expanding somewhat, but the utility scale is really taken off. I guess that's probably because there's a lot of money to be made in the utility scale. So a few facts about utility scale solar. It's estimated that every megawatt of energy takes 5 to 10 acres of land. So when I do my calculations, I usually use 7.5 acres. But if there's no degraded land available, what tends to happen is flat lands that is near energy infrastructure. So if you have like a large power line going through your county or something, and that's flat land that is near population centers. So Hardy County is pretty near DC. We have a whole lot of open green flat land, and we have some big projects proposed. So we really need to think about what that's going to do to our farming community in the future. The Energy Information Administration, they've got some really good data. In 2023 alone, they estimate there's going to be 29,000 megawatts of new utility scale solar energy project planned. And that's a 32% increase from that number from last year. So we're needing more and more energy. So these numbers are just increasing and increasing. Approximately, that will be 218,250 acres of land. So that's a lot of land. And according to SEIA, there are only 37,000 megawatts of utility scale solar in production now. I think that seems pretty low because we're almost doubling the acreage of what's existing now, and we're doubling that in the next year or so. So how much is too much? How much land, you know, or is acceptable to use for this? The National Energy Laboratory research shows that we could power the whole US with 0.6% of our land mass. That is roughly a little bit more than the size of West Virginia. But where will those acres be located? And what's going to happen to that land when the technologies change and, you know, things become more efficient, we've got all these solar panels on all of this land. Is it gonna be more degraded land? I mean, you know, I don't think so. Some people say so, but I don't think it's, that solar panels really have that much, possibility for, pollution, but they do add a whole lot of infrastructure to the area. So just to give you a little bit of, idea of what our land use concerns are with ag, it's the cumulative loss of our ag land. It's has the potential to disrupt the whole balance of that economy. You'll be taking land out of production for a whole generation. And when, like, you know, a farmer, usually the son takes over, the nephew takes over, the grandson. But when that land is out of production for more than a generation, it's pretty unlikely that someone's going to come back and want to farm that again, buy all that equipment and start up from scratch again. And once the infrastructure is constructed, what is the real likelihood that it's not going to stay that? I mean, because these leases are like 30 to 50 years, but like I said before, when there's a project that's a certain size, if the project grows, it becomes more financially feasible for the developer. So it's probably more financially feasible for everyone to just leave it as solar. And then the decommissioning and reclamation measures. I don't know if we really have those established in West Virginia clearly yet. Does anyone know that? So I don't think there's actually been any solar project that has been, you know, is old enough to have been, you know, reclaimed yet. So we really don't know how that's going to go. I mean, I do know that the solar developers in our county who've been able to get leases from our farmers have told them, oh, you know, we'll just you have solar on this for 30 years and then you can take it back into production. But when you think about that huge amount of infrastructure and the land disturbance, is that true? I mean, I don't know if it's true. I don't think anyone really does. So how are we going to power smarter? Thankfully, there's good news. The EPA has a program called Repowering America's Land, and they've identified the same kind of benefits these guys have talked about and that they've seen. You can leverage existing infrastructure on degraded sites. There's streamlined permitting and zoning because, you know, everybody wants to see their brownfields redeveloped. There's often reduced land costs and incentives in these areas that are brownfields. And you can gain community support because you're revitalizing and you're still protecting the greenlands. So here's a map of the degraded land that EPA has identified in West Virginia. It's approximately 466,000 acres. Now, are these sites going to be more challenging than an open field? Of course they are, but we think that that's definitely worth the costs. There's also other data, the TAGUS data from DEP. I think that they have more like 750,000 acres that they say is degraded, but I think EPA has put that information through some filtering, and these are actually sites that are at least somewhat viable. Is that true? Do you know? That are at least somewhat viable for green energy. So I took this data, you can download it. I took it and put it into my GIS, and I put it, overlaid it with Power Grid that I got from solar developers that are in Hardy County. You know, that shows that whole eastern part over there where we are, Hardy, Pendleton, Hampshire, even Greenbrier, Pocahontas, Monroe. That's where the farms are, the large farms. And do we really want to put, you know, more degraded land in that area or potential for degraded land when we have all of that to our west? And it seems to be fairly well connected when you look at the transmission line maps. So you can the data is really interesting. You can break it down into brownfields, Superfund sites, and then abandoned mines, and even the acreage. You can do all of that from the data that you can download from EPA. So a few resources that are available are a couple of reports. Someone's already mentioned at least one of these, but Downstream Strategies did a report some time ago where It's called Prospects for Large Scale Solar on Degraded Land in West Virginia. And they put the EPA data through a little more analysis, and I think they used slope, land cover, slopes, and then acreage, and how that acreage would be suitable for large scale projects. So they identified some particular sites, and they tried to identify some in every region. So it's a really interesting study. And they actually pulled out like the most suitable sites for each county. There's another study, which you mentioned, that the Nature Conservancy did, along with Downstream Strategies and WV Law Center for Energy and Sustainable Development. That's got some really good information in it. It actually talks about the West Virginia disadvantage, like how much less solar we have than other surrounding states. And they do identify that one of the reasons for that is our policy, our state policy does not make it conducive. They again outline the benefits, but they also talk a lot about the stakeholders. And this report, they say that they're very committed to getting the stakeholders on board. Like you'd said earlier, you really gotta have that. And I think that was their focus. But other stakeholders are people like us and our legislators, and we really need to get them on board to make this work. So how's West Virginia doing so far? So it's really hard to find this data in West Virginia. It's not like we have like a renewable energy department like Virginia does, where you can just kind of go and see where all the sites are. So I had to do a lot of research on this, but there are projects kind of in some level of development on 3,877 acres of land in West Virginia. The Hobart mine site in Boone and Lincoln counties, the old DuPont explosives plant in Berkeley County, and then Longview coal-powered plant in Mon County. But we also have a lot of projects that are in development or proposed on our ag lands. So 8,000 acres plus of ag land. There's one that's currently still under development. I don't think it's done. 841 acres in Jefferson County, which there was a lot of opposition to that one. 529 acres in Raleigh. There's 150 acres in Hampshire County right now. I think it's just starting up. But 500 more acres proposed. That's extremely controversial in Hampshire County because it's ag land. And then we have 3,000 acres proposed in Hardy County and Grant counties. Those in Hardy County, we do have countywide zoning. So it's currently not a permitted use because it is in ag land. So, we're all working through those issues. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the Grant County land, I have to say, it is ag land, but it is near degraded sites. So there's a lot of pasture land and things like that are up near the windmills. But it's still ag land, and someone is leasing it and using that, hay for their cattle. There are thankfully some utility projects that are proposed in West Virginia. First Energy is proposing these projects on degraded land. So the legislature did pass a bill that requires projects that a utility uses to be on degraded land. So they have 95 acres proposed in Mon County, 44 in Tucker. That is, I think that's a strip mine. That's not the land. There is a landfill in Tucker County though. And 26 acres in Berkeley County, 63 in Pleasance, and 51 in Hancock. So that's it's good to see that they're doing that. But I think I'll talk a little bit more about the legislation, but there is a limit on the amount of solar that utilities in West Virginia can utilize. Just touching on the utility scale wind again, there's not that much degraded land that is available for wind, but just to give you some some numbers on this. There's a big project in Greenbrier County. I was actually the planner in Greenbrier County when that project went in. And it's a very large project, 67 wind turbines, but it was on West Vaco land. And I think it was a pretty good project, honestly. I think that was a good use. There's also the big project that a lot of you have seen if you've driven Corridor H from, Hardy County out into Tucker County. That's 132 wind turbines total. You can't see all of those from the corridor, but that runs all along the Allegheny front from Mount Storm. And then there's a couple of others that are in Grant and Mineral, the Black Rock project. I don't know how much of that was actually on degraded land. Like I said, when those start, they start kind of on the degraded land and then they kind of, move along the ridge. So I don't know if those were on mine lands, honestly, or not. But we do have a proposed project in Hardy County that is definitely not on degraded land. And there's a lot of opposition to that. It is a project that's proposed in a residential district. It is proposing 600-foot turbines, which are the new really large turbines. And some of the sites are barely 600 feet away from new construction homes, $500,000 plus homes, and they're moving forward. There's not allowed with our zoning right now. Again, we're still fighting with that, but at least we do have that level of protection for right now. But that's a really good example of poor siting. So we're not the only state that's making some bad decisions. Virginia, there's a study done in Virginia that shows that 58% of utility scale solar projects are occurring on forest lands and 25 on crop lands. So in Virginia, there's a lot of old tobacco fields, and there's some really huge projects there. According to some estimates, there'll be over 100,000 acres of utility scale solar in Virginia by 2024. There's some huge projects proposed. Really controversial project in Charlotte County that's 21,000 acres and it's primarily ag land. So what can we do? We can promote smart energy development. So if you're a community, let's inform your population about these different types that we were talking about and how they benefit, like the community solar and the behind the meter. It benefits the people locally. Educate your landowners about solar and the pitfalls of predatory lease agreements, especially on ag land. And I say that I talk to the farmers that have leased their land in Hardy County, and they were not allowed to talk to their neighbors about the negotiations. And it was before we even knew this was happening. We didn't get a chance to educate them about putting things in the leases, about reclamation and leaving access for them, or they didn't even know about the possibility of co-locating with agriculture, which is a really interesting prospect. It would be like forcing the solar companies to, raise the solar panels so they can still graze underneath or things like that. And that's things that the Department of Agriculture, I think, are looking into, which I think that would be a great option. We can directly address your community's viewpoint in your comprehensive plans and other policies. Work with your economic development entities, Brownfields organization, other people to identify and actively market the degraded sites in your community. Specifically address these issues in your zoning ordinances if you have any. Very few people have those in West Virginia, I know. And stay informed and engaged in state government legislation that involves energy policy. So specifically about land use policies, I know a lot of you don't have zoning, but I do. So I just wanted to talk about a few things you can do is distinguish the different types of and sizes in your policies. So like I said, make the small projects a permitted use, make the mid-sized projects conditional with, a few conditions, those kinds of things, especially if they're community solar and the people are surrounding them or benefiting from it. Directly address your viewpoint on utility scale solar in your comp plan. Address and encourage co-location of agriculture what I was talking about before, can be pasture land, even pollinator fields underneath the solar panels. And some people out west, I think, are even starting to do gardens. They say tomatoes do really well under the solar panels. And then identify areas that are available that you would like to see in these projects, and areas that you definitely do not. So you need to have that balance. You need to clearly identify your conservation areas that are very important, and also identify the areas where you would like to see these projects. The Soul Smart, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. That's something that the National Association of Counties is promoting. It's got some amazing resources in this document that they have. You can just Google Soul Smart, but it's a program guide. It gives details about what different ordinances and templates and things like that. From everything from building, permitting, zoning. I think it even gets into some of the tax issues and things like that, which I don't really know that much about. So now to talk about the state policy. There have been some pro-renewable state policies. Senate Bill 578 in 2020. That's what actually made solar even feasible in West Virginia. That's why we're kind of behind. We didn't have a lot of projects at all before that. They reduced the tax rate to make it financially feasible to even do solar. Senate Bill 583 created state code, the Renewable Energy Facilities Program, and that authorizes the utilities to use solar power. It also defines eligible site, and that is degraded land. So we really like to see that. But again, it only applies to our utilities. It does not apply to these large, huge grid projects, which we would also like to see them have to at least consider those sites before they choose ag land or greenfields. And that's where I see the inequity, and that's really promoting poor decision making. There's also been attempts from the legislature in the last few years to exempt energy production facilities from local land use law. And Hardy County really fought hard the last 2 years on these bills. House Bill 4553 and another one kind of came around in a different way on House Bill 3446 and 2459. And we're expecting similar legislation again in 2024. And as a community that has zoning and has had zoning since the 1960s, we really want to maintain our ability to, have a say in where these projects are located. The legislature has also refused to pass laws that would make community solar projects more feasible. So unfortunately, those are not really feasible right now. There is an organization, Solar United Neighbors, that is working hard to develop legislation and push that to make that possible. And unfortunately, again, the PSC is currently considering lowering the net metering benefits for residential commercial. So that would be a really hard hit, I believe. So something that we can do in 2024, there's actually someone who's proposing legislation that will promote the development of these projects on brownfields. It's Delegate Evan Hansen, and I apologize to him that I spelled his name. I got a typo. It's actually Hansen with an E, and he's developing that legislation right now. And he asked me to have anyone who's interested in having an input on that to contact him at Evan Hansen at wvhouse.gov. That's all I have. Thank you all.
So much, Melissa. I just want to try to get our office landlord to build the solar panels at a parking lot. So
Yeah.
that was an awesome idea. I go back and try to do that. Okay, so next, I'm going to invite Beth Whitehouse. She's the Senior Director of Strategic Planning here at Ogilvy. And when we met, right before we met, Ogilvy came out with a very large announcement about their upcoming solar project in partnership with IMC Solar. And when we were here meeting and picking all of our sessions, I said, wait a minute, we just came out with a big announcement. Let's have them show us what they're doing. So Beth is so nice to be here today and to tell us a little bit about their project. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And as a representative of Ogilvy, I want to thank each of you for attending this conference. We appreciate having you here, and as we were talking earlier, it's interesting to watch all the different companies come in and show exactly what they're doing with regards to all the renewables and different sustainability efforts as well.
I think you want to use the remote. Oh, there we go.
All right. So why would Ogilvy get into the renewable energy business? We are obviously a resort, a community park, and it's something that we hadn't ever considered. It's one of those things that we started to look about a year ago at all of our sustainability efforts. And we took that as a strategy. There was a lot we were doing, but we just weren't telling anybody about it. And so we decided to make it a focal point of our vision and our values, and making sure that we were doing the very best thing that we could to be stewards of the land that was donated by Colonel Ogilvy. And so we wanted to make sure that our sustainability efforts were something that we were talking about, as we move forward. One of the things, so we were approached actually by IMC Solar with a unique opportunity. And if we start to get into any technical questions, Jen, I'll just, I'm a layman, right? So you guys are way ahead of me in terms of your knowledge, but we were provided with an opportunity, and the opportunity was, would we consider using solar as a renewable energy towards our sustainability efforts? And what would that look like for Ogilvy and our operation? Well, we're actually a nonprofit, which is a little bit unique. We're municipally owned. And so we have to be very careful with exactly how we invest our funds. So everything we make goes directly back into the resort. But this was a unique opportunity because what IMC Solar had proposed to us is that we would be able to have solar, and that they would essentially do a diagnostic test and find funders who would pay to have all of the solar installed, that Ogilvy would have no financial outlay, and then we would enter into a power purchase agreement with the funder. And we would commit to 25 years of a power purchase agreement, and that we would essentially be paying less than we're currently paying to AEP, right? And that essentially our rate would grow at a lesser rate each year. We'll look at that actually on another slide. But it would grow at a lesser rate than the average does with regards to the power that we're currently purchasing. And so we looked at many different areas. One of the things that we were very, very careful of was our view shed. We are in the resort business. We are in the beauty business, right? And so we want to make sure that this was not going to impact our view shed at all. And we were very mindful. One of the things I loved about working with IMC Solar is each of the people that I worked with on that team actually used the resort and used the park. They grew up here. They were invested as we were. And that was important to us to show exactly what we held valuable in terms of our guests. So we were able to come up with approximately 16 projects that could essentially offset about 2,832,100 kilowatt of electric usage. And so I've put some statistics on there of exactly what that means. And so 225,842 gallons of gasoline consumed, 86,000 trash bags. And so we would be able to offset that. So for Ogilvy, that meant, again, no upfront cost. We would agree to purchase our electricity off of the solar system owner for 20 to 25 years. And then we would only pay for the power that the system produced through that power purchase agreement. An option, actually, I don't know what that's cutting off. I wanted to add this real quick. So, an option for us also would be is at the end of that agreement, they would either restore, of course, or we would purchase the system outright. And so those were some of the benefits that we were able to see. So we broke all those 16 projects into some main categories. And you'll see, when we look at our total use of 6,929,000, it's not gonna offset all of our power. That wasn't our objective. Our objective was to use as much solar power as possible without interfering with our operation. Equally, so when we talk about making sure that we are careful with sustainability, right, and fields, about a year ago, we entered into an agreement, a forestry management agreement towards sustainability with an energy company. And they manage about a little over 1,000 acres of our unmanned land. And they essentially remove all the invasive species and replant new trees that are native to our area so that we are maintaining a healthy forest system. One of the things that we looked at as we started to look at this project is we essentially wanted to do roof panels. That makes perfect sense. But we also wanted to do covered parking areas with EV charging stations for our guests as well. When we look at how that affects the power purchase agreement rate, the parking structures essentially would cost 2 times as much as putting on a rooftop unit. And so we sit there and we go, we're still going to do EV charging stations, but in order to get the best power purchase agreement, is it in our best interest to do that? And so Jen and her team were able to get creative, and we were able to find out through our local area that as long as we placed the panels within 2 miles, am I saying that right? Within 2 miles of the essentially the meter, that we were able to utilize land that wasn't being used at all. It literally is just a field, and it's with our forestry management team. And so Jen took a look at those, and we will be able to put essentially array panels on the ground. We certainly didn't want you to look out here and see solar panels. That wasn't our objective, but we wanted to make sure that we were capitalizing on as much renewable energy as we could in order to be sustainable. Again, right now, we're in the sustainability business, but the companies that want to purchase these agreements are in the renewable energy and federal tax credit business. And so it was the perfect marriage of both. We're able to establish sustainability best practices, and they are able to receive the renewable energy credits. And so it was great. And again, one of the benefits is as an example, we would pay 10 cents per kilowatt hour for the solar power versus 13 cents per kilowatt hour through AEP. And equally, as the rates increase, solar is increasing at about 2% per year on average, whereas the regular electricity was raising about 3.04%. So the long-term investment was a good investment for us, so that we will essentially see lower power bills with regards to that. So again, as an example, these are some of the rooftop units that we will be looking at. We currently are putting in a parking lot, the parking structures and the EV charging stations. Again, just due to how expensive they are right now, and to a funder, the more they have to put in, the more the power purchase agreement is going to increase. And so we wanted to keep that cost low. And so we looked at solar rooftop units as well as some field array in different areas that right now do not impact our guests at all. They're not located in areas that are visual. So for us, just in conclusion, for us, it was really a matter of being able to offer sustainability to Ogilvy and to also do that in a way that allows us to be responsible. And IMC Solar is a great partner as it relates to, taking care of doing all of the, diligent work in calculating all of these things, finding funders, and then essentially, assisting us with entering into a power purchase agreement. So that's our little story.
Now you'll all have to return to come see how it turns out.
Mhm.
All right, so we have about enough time for one question because lunch is at noon and no one wants to hold you back from lunch and no one wants you to see you get hangry. So, we'll take one question, and then if you have any additional ones, feel free to come up after the presentation, but also be mindful that our presenters are hungry too.
Mhm.
I'll make one comment, and this knows has a question. Can I do that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Comment is, as I work in rural communities all over, solar always comes up there. And one thing I have learned is that people don't understand what a kilowatt is, a kilowatt hour, 1 megawatt is, and all those things. And I always do this all the time. Now, how much do you pay for your gasoline? I pay $3.49 a gallon water. How much do you pay for electricity? Oh, my bill last month was this much. Nobody knows those. And so that, like in the Brownfield arena, we're doing daily, it's education on a regular basis. That needs to be done on the energy side in the worst way. And I can say this, and it's okay if I'm quoted, but and our legislature needs to understand the same thing. So folks do not understand what we're talking about when we're talking about these things. So all the education we can do along the way that you can incorporate in there, it will give us good returns in the future, I suspect.
You think there's gotta be an infographic out there, and just this week, I sent our, VRP program infographic to a legislature, and they said, oh, okay, now I understand.
Mm.
So if that's out there, we gotta find it.
I've been told for the legislature, it has to be a 5th grade level or less. Just saying.
Just saying.
George Carrick's comments or his own comments, you're gonna be held responsible for it. All right,
Okay.
one question, anyone? Do you have something to say?
No? I'm gonna go lunch.
All right, Shay.
Quick comment for the sake of lunch.
Okay,
I just want to say I really appreciate Melissa bringing up the concerns about losing our agricultural lands, especially in this region. There's so much limited ag land left in West Virginia. And then, but bringing that up in comparison with the degraded land map, and as somebody who's from and is working in North Central West Virginia, and we are having economic development discussion weekly about these sites and are struggling so much to get new investments on these degraded properties. And so it'd be very important for our communities in that region, and I imagine the southern part of the state feels the same way, to get these maybe solar facilities in there, and where it would be a good adaptive reuse of that land as well. So I appreciate that conversation, because I think that's important to those communities and your community as well, and counter to that. So, yeah. Thank you.
Good question.
well, thank you to all of our panelists. We truly appreciate you being here today. A round of applause for them.